Hi, welcome to SportX, where we talk all things relating to the ever evolving business of sport and the people that make things happen in this vibrant industry. I'm Gerard Davids, founder of TalkX TV, where we host SportX as a content channel, and I'm joined by Emeka Enyadike, who is a director at Digital Sports Africa and the Africa director of Result Sports, a German sports data agency, and director of VanDykeSports, and also a director of Sports Network Africa. Welcome to SportX and the segment we host, hashtag What I Do in Sport. So, Emeka, let's start off with informing us as to what it is that you do in the sports industry.
Just about everything. I'm one of those people that you'll find across different verticals, whether it's media, communications, digital strategy, broadcasting. I'm still involved with broadcasting and involved um, with uh, the football ecosystem generally, looking at what it is that powers the engine of the game on the continent and where it is possible also basketball and a lot of the platforms who haven't been around essentially across Africa. We are at a very critical point of the industry where there's a lot of um, you know a lot of changes, a lot of positive changes, a lot of innovations, and a turnaround period for the industry where there's a lot more structure. So there are few people who have the kind of expertise that we have and that we bring, and from an advisory point of view, we're able to provide that.
Okay, so if you look back at your 20 years or so, be it in the sports media industry or in the sports data industry, what is it that you can relate in terms of your experience of how things have changed within the whole spectrum?
So I think for the most part, the big changes have come about um, more in terms of the changing dynamics of the market. Uh, Many years ago, there was very low connectivity on the continent, so the idea of mobile phone wasn't something that if you go back even 30 years ago, um, all of Africa was more or less what you would call the analog stage. But I think to a large extent, people didn't realize just how much things changed with the turn of the century around the year 2000 when you had the bug. It didn't affect us so much because we didn't have a lot of platforms in that space. But post 2000, there was far more mobile connectivity, even though the internet wasn't uh, that much of a big deal. But as someone who was, um, a digital pioneer, I remember launching a website in 2002, and people thinking, you know, who's going to read it, or who's going to read your content, who's going to go there. But as young people evolved, they came with their ideas about what they wanted to see, and so there was a lot of curiosity, and people were able to look up to it. So on the back of launching a very successful magazine like Kickoff magazine in 2002, we also then created a website which surprisingly had a great uptake, and people were actually going there. Television, as we know it at the time, had become very much dominated by cable TV. There was a lot more, um, uh, a few players in the market, but mostly dominated by DSTV. And of course, with that came SuperSport. And then, of course, from an advertising and sponsorship framework, there was still a very strong radio and terrestrial TV presence. But what we've seen, and we're talking about 2000, and then if you go 10 years further, just before we had the 2010 World Cup in Africa, um, there was now just the mere fact that Africa was going to host the World Cup. There was a lot more interest in the sports space, and between that period, we saw South Africa host the Cricket World Cup in 2003, and don't forget, if you go back a few years earlier, they had hosted the Rugby World Cup with all of that whole the dynamics of the changing landscape, particularly with Nelson Mandela becoming president and the things that happened within that period, and of course a lot more interesting things like Afcon and some other properties. But you found that people who worked and operated within the sports space were slow to catch up with these changes, but a lot of it uh, kind of went deeper with the launch of smartphones and the advent of the iPhones going through the year 2007, the emergence of social media going back to YouTube, and then obviously MySpace and a few other ones, and then of course, and then just before 2010, then there was Facebook and Twitter, and suddenly there were a lot more people, young people engaged on the platform, and the people who operated in the industry struggled. Then, of course, you had now this balance where the brands wanted more, but the platforms just were not equipped for all of that. So it's quite interesting that I've been involved with that evolution, starting out with newspapers and radio, the internet, and then onto the age of social media, broadcasting, and just everything in between. So that has been a very very interesting journey.
Yeah, thanks for that. And so, looking back, as you sketch the evolution over this last 20 odd years or so, what would you say were the biggest learning curves for yourself in terms of your personal career development?
I think the biggest learning for me was just the idea that you had to improve your knowledge. I mean, it was always important for you to learn, and it was important for you to keep track of the evolution and look at what is it, what's happening, what is new, what is going on, what's the new trend, and then being right on top of it. And I think that for me, I was blessed that at the time I joined DSTV online. It was probably the one company that was best equipped to react to all the changes in Africa, and I was right in the middle of everything that was happening there. So it was critical for me because um, between 2000 and 2010, I was involved in publishing. I was involved in sponsorships, and I remember back then that when we had a lot of companies do. I mean, I did a lot of projects in Nigeria um, with Vodacom, with MTN, and a lot of those brands, and a lot of them looked more towards physical visibility at the events where they had these sponsorships. It was more about having their signs out there, having people wearing T-shirts, and having all of those kind of activations. I remember we did a sponsorship activation with V-Mobile, which was the successor company to Vodacom in Nigeria. We did a sponsorship in the university, and it was more about painting everywhere red in their colors and having people wear that. We did that with the basketball league as well. But if you look at the evolution today, a brand that is involved in those kind of sponsorships is they're looking for a lot more than just having their
Yeah,
their billboards and having the branding and all of that. They're looking more at the engagement, looking at how deeper they can go with the market, the audience. Who are you reaching out to, and what is the property offering? Whereas if you go back those days, it was more the brand trying to push a lot of that, and now the question isn't who are you reaching on TV or radio or newspapers. It's more
yeah.
things are a lot more measurable.
Yeah.
Whereas back then it
Mm,
was pretty difficult to ascertain,
mm, mm,
what the impact is. Today, you can measure
mm,
exactly what it is, and this cuts
mm,
across the entire spectrum of media,
mm,
marketing,
mm,
communications,
mm,
every single thing that you do. Um, you have to be accountable. It has to be measurable. You have to know the real impact and see to what extent
mm.
it goes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I hear we got a bit of a a visitor there, a dog, wanting
Yeah.
to be part of the conversation. But looking back at your career path, what is the one piece of advice you would give to someone just starting out in this career? I mean, you having that, looking to the rear view mirror as to where you came from in terms of, 2000 and now in 2024, where things look vastly different. What other advice that you would give to somebody entering this space?
Mentorship. Mentorship is the biggest thing
Yeah.
that you can get, because for some of us we didn't have there was no one who could guide us all the way, because we kind of evolved with the with the industry. So going back now, the idea is to be able to find those who are the leaders in the various space, to see to what extent they can hold their hands and guide them, because you can read, you can go to all the schools. The biggest challenge in Africa is that there isn't even enough education for the sports industry. A lot of the institutions do not have that. Whereas, if you look at Europe, America, even Asia, there's a lot more sports industry education, and this is one of the things that I've paid a lot of attention with people that have worked with me, and this is one of the reasons why a few years ago, before COVID, I launched a program called the Sports Apprentice, where we created
Mm,
a platform for people uh, to learn. We used to do it
mm,
physically, and then of
mm,
course when COVID came, we took it online, and we created a platform where people were then able to engage with a lot of
mm,
young people. And in my entire career, that has always been the topmost thing for me, guiding
mm.
those who are there and showing them, where we're coming from, and
Yeah.
potentially where we're going to, because when you've been in that space for as long as I have been, then you understand the changing dynamics, that nothing is static, everything evolves, and there's going to be
Mm.
constant movement in terms of technology, in terms of
Yes.
just basically how you do things, and what to expect next. What is the next challenge? You have to anticipate. You have to look at it and say, okay, look, who are my competition? If you look at this, you operate in an industry. Who's your competition? Your competition is not in your rear view mirror. It's
Yeah.
coming. It's it's the next one. We're talking about AI now. So
Yeah.
how do you prepare for it? So my advice, if I was to advise myself from many years ago, it would be that I get the opportunity to learn under the right kind of people, and to take on you know um, a lot more hands-on approach in terms of how
Hmm.
I relate with those who have come before.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that sage advice, Emeka. And that was Emeka Enyadike, Director at Digital Sports Africa and Africa Director of Result Sports Group, a German sports data agency, Director of VanDykeSports and Sports Network Africa as well. Thank you for your time and insights, which is very much appreciated. That's where we will leave it for now. And thank you for watching hashtag What I Do in Sport on the SportX channel, which is hosted on TalkX TV. Until next time, thank you.